Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting, and we have a few items before we go into a joint session with the City Council, but I'll welcome our City Council members who are here so far. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask for comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. And seeing none, we'll move right on. Any amendments to the agenda?
Nope.
All right. And I'll welcome back Arnell, our student rep, who is a senior now, correct?
Yeah, it's crazy.
There you hear it.
Yesterday I was starting on the board as a junior, but I don't have too many announcements to announce besides obviously the school year is officially underway, and that's really exciting. Other than that, really the only update I had was about the junior representative, which we talked about a little bit. I did email Mr. Burke. And so he, as for the last few years since it transitioned from any student instead of just student council, they made an application, and Mr. Burke has that application, and so we talked about it, and he told me he'll send it out and put me on the email chain as soon as possible. And then I'll also post it on the Facebook pages, and then hopefully we'll have some students that apply. I know from talking with last year, we had a lot of students interested, so hopefully that will go on. My goal is to get somebody on quicker than me last year, so hopefully before the Thanksgiving break. But yeah, that's about it. So hopefully that'll happen.
We'll hold you to that.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Good. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Good. All right. We're on to agenda item 6, which is a joint meeting with the City Council to consider and possibly approve an agreement for the exchange of rights and interest in real property. We're operating on a just-in-time basis here. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad, Kevin, you brought the name tags over.
I did.
I was asking Helen if you had to carry your own. So perhaps I could invite, we have David Rue, who has represented the school board, and Andrew, I don't know if you'd like to. Okay. Andrew Baldock, who's representing the City Council. David is going to kind of walk through the elements. Do we have packets? Does the council have the packet?
No.
We got, you know.
You didn't bring over the draft copy, did you?
Yep.
Oh, you did?
The agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
And all this
Just one.
documents.
What do you think,
I
David?
meant, did you
Do you
bring
want-
have a
over
couple
the-
of-
I can share with
Sign.
somebody.
Versions. I have other versions too, other copies if council would like some.
Those are in the,
Oh.
are they in the packet, Meg?
No,
Well, these are
are
extras,
they?
right?
Okay. I
These are the
didn't think they
signable
were.
executable
Oh,
ones, but
okay.
can be used.
Well, Tim and I can share.
I don't know if it's
Well,
in
I don't
that.
think it's
I
in
don't
that.
think it's in that.
So
tag
here,
now.
take one of these. We'll keep the
That's right.
signables. Does anybody else want to give one? I can keep a signable one
Yeah,
here.
I have it on my iPad, so
I've got it.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, if you've got enough to look on, maybe.
Yeah.
So David, Helen, I don't know if you need to call the council into session.
Oh, I guess I should call into session a joint meeting of the City Council and the South Burlington School Board. And then, David, you're gonna take us through.
I'm David Rue from Stitzel, Page and Fletcher. I've worked with City Attorney Andrew Baldock in negotiating this agreement for the exchange of rights and interest in real estate. This is it provides reciprocal benefits to both the school district and the city, advancing the new municipal building at 180 Market Street, with the support of the school board providing some easements to enable the construction of the new municipal building. The reciprocal benefits for both parties include the creation of a new permanent access to Rick Marcotte Central School from Market Street, providing sufficient land to build the preferred design of a new municipal building with some parking to support that facility, improving and expanding the existing parking lots at Rick Marcotte Central School, enhancing and improving safe access to the Rick Marcotte Central School by limiting traffic through the school parcel itself while providing access to the new municipal building. That new municipal building access will include stormwater treatment and some limited parking for the municipal building. This agreement provides sufficient land area to create an appropriate turning radius for large vehicles that will use future Garden Street by way of an easement to be conveyed by the school district to the city. It also has the benefit of having the closest building to Rick Marcotte Central School be a municipal building that includes a library and senior center. And by construction of the new municipal building and reconfiguring the Marcotte Central parking lots, it will enhance stormwater treatment associated with both facilities. It will also provide, through the school district's opportunity to lease the current City Hall building, sufficient space for relocating and consolidating the school district's administrative offices immediately across Dorset Street from South Burlington High School and Tuttle Middle School. And it will provide improved learning opportunities for students in both Tuttle Middle School and South Burlington High School by moving and consolidating those administrative offices across the street. Lastly, the deal also potentially provides access to Mary Street by the Rick Marcotte Central School and the municipal building through the Allard Square property located at the corner of Market Street and Mary Street.
Okay, do we want to open it up for any questions or comments? I think that can be both parties.
Are there any comments?
I just wanted to say, really, that I think that I voted for the library, City Hall, Senior Center last night to put it before the voters. And I really, I want to just celebrate this collaboration with the school board. And I realize that we both are operating, very differently. We have very different boards, yet we're all, living in the same city and working towards the betterment of this city. And hopefully, I thought that the public could see that this is a way for just collaboration between these two bodies in a way that will enhance the city overall. I understand that the school will potentially investigate how best to use 575 Dorset. It may not be exactly as it is right now. I don't know any specifics, but just by the details of the agreement, I've understood now that there are some I think I don't want to say an option that you can explore to see how this piece of land and potentially this building fits your needs. And I think that some of us were seeking for that to be articulated. I think it was articulated in the current document before us in a way that was the clearest to me over these past months. So I appreciate that. And that clarity is something that I operate well in. And I know that for the city overall, this will be a real, just a bonus to be able to have a good neighbor for Central School, have a neighbor that will provide an anchor and potentially really generate the development of a city center that will enhance that part of the city, but also the city overall, really representing who we are and our identity, and having the school there, I think, is part of that identity. So I hope that you feel, just as I do, that this is a really positive exchange. And I just wanted to, I did want to say that I appreciate the clarity of this agreement. I think that it provided clarity that I needed. And I just want to celebrate that we have really come together to really do something for the city and bring a positive center and really express who we are. So I'm sorry, that's not very eloquent, but I think that I hope you got the gist of it.
That was good.
All right.
I just want to embellish, I was very pleased to see, and I can't remember which exhibit, but there's actually language that really talks about cooperation and how important that is, and that's a part of this agreement, and I think that's important. And to recognize it in this document is a bonus, I believe. So I'm very happy that we are at a place where we can approve this tonight and really move forward and ask the voters and give them the chance to make that decision. And I also appreciate the articulation of the positives for both sides of the street, so to speak. I think that's really important for the public to know. And I appreciated having that in this.
What I'd like to add, and endorsing and agreeing with what Helen and Megan said, is this will probably be the last time the city council and the school board meet before election day, meet together before election day. And I don't know if all of you are on board with this or not. I'm hoping so. I think it's as they've said, a major step forward for the city. And of course, we couldn't go to the vote without this agreement being completed. But it's also a vote that's going to take a lot of energy to pass in all likelihood. And I'm hoping the school board can be proactive, either as individuals or as a unit, in helping to get this vote passed. Because certainly I think most of the folks, the majority of the folks who understand what we're doing, I think will favor this project and want to move it forward and vote in the positive for it. But as you all know, there's too many people out there that really don't pay attention to anything, and they just see something that costs money and vote against it. And that's a major concern when we've got, this has got, what, Andrew, 4 items or 5 items on the ballot?
5.
That's enough so people will look at it and say, I'm not voting for any of these. And therein lies a challenge. So I encourage the school board to be proactive, and the library board and the library folks have said they're going to do everything they possibly can to bring out the positive votes. I encourage you folks to please do the same.
Any other comments or thoughts?
School board?
Well, Tim, do you want to chime in?
I voted no last night,
Yeah.
and I gave my reasons for that then. I don't want to belabor it again. I don't think it's the right location. It's too much money. It's not enough space. There's a number of factors that I think that are part of this decision, and so, but they have the votes to carry it forward, but I'm here tonight to express that other opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just for the public who wasn't at the city council meeting, Tom Chittenden also abstained from voting, so it was kind of 3-1 and 1, but passed. And the 2 articles the city had passed contingent on the approval of the agreement tonight, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. School board?
Yeah, I was pleased to hear a couple of you talk about collaboration, and I would just like to say that I hope that we can continue to collaborate, because although tonight we're approving something, hopefully, I'm assuming, we're approving something that will, as you said, really move the city forward, and I think a lot of us are very excited, especially about the library aspect and the senior center aspect of this project. There are still some gray areas, and this document and this deal really requires a little bit of a leap of faith on the part of the school board, because we're sort of providing easements, and then it's a few years before anything sort of comes out of this that really benefits the school district directly. And so in that interim, we really hope that this can be the start of more collaboration to sort of work out those things that are still a little bit gray, things like parking, things like maintenance issues at 575 Dorset Street, things that are still, under discussion. We've laid out how we'll work together on those things, but those are things that we're going to really have to work intensely together to make sure that they do benefit both parties and that they benefit the city as a whole. So I think I'm personally very excited about the project, and have put a lot of time into sort of trying to get comfortable with it when I wasn't at first, and now I'm very enthusiastic about it. But I do think that we need to continue to work together to sort of get through some of these things that could be stumbling blocks if communication breaks down. So.
And Dave, one comment you made is, I hope it may not be the end of a mutual meeting. One of the things that I know.
Might be the only one before election day, maybe not.
Correct. And one of the things I know, the subcommittee that, Helen, I'm sorry you were not available at, and Tom's not here to recount it, but a recommendation was made to potentially turn the steering committee meetings that we have of the city council and the school board, at a minimum by charter, we have 4 of those a year, to turn those into maybe more proactive working sessions with or without facilitation. But because this is a significant project, I know through master planning and visioning, we're talking about a pipeline over the next 5 to 10 years that could represent some significant asks of the voters. And it would be, I think it'd be great for our community to see both municipalities or municipal bodies kind of have those conversations in an active way. You know, this is the first kind of significant one. Any other board comments?
Yeah, I'm ready to chime in.
Alex, yeah.
Yeah, I've looked at this a lot and thought about it a lot, obviously. And the way I see it is that for the school district, there's a lot of upside, but there's also some potential downside. The upside is that we may have a need for classroom capacity that currently is being used by administrative offices. And if we move those administrative offices to the municipal building in a few years, that could save the school district the need of having to build temporary trailer buildings that everyone hates, have to bond for a new school or an expansion or something like that. So that I think is one of the big potential upsides. The unknown, which I've been asking about for a while, is how does 575 Dorset Street fit the administrative offices for the school district? You know, I've been talking about, we need to know how much square footage our administrative offices use and compare that to how much square footage is in 575 Dorset Street. And, is the thing going to be half empty? And then there's the issue of the maintenance, and the potential stumbling blocks that Bridget has mentioned. So I think, on the whole, I'm in favor of this, but there are some unanswered questions that do have me concerned. Thank you. And also, I do think it's a great idea that the municipal offices are going to a future downtown. I think that's a good concept.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, Steve? Okay. Good, yeah, and I think from the get-go, I think the community center project is really, the city's been the major driver of that, and the school has been, very willing to invest resources through David. And I want to thank Andrew and David for having worked so closely together to kind of get us here tonight. The school does take a secondary need, not only because of the timing of the benefits, but also that hasn't been the major driver of the project. We're really trying to collaborate with the city needs and for our mutual citizens as well. But unless there's any other comments, and I'm not seeing any. Helen, do you want to start with a motion from the council?
So I guess the first motion is, is to approve agreement for the exchange. Is that?
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve the agreement as titled and authorizing you as the chair of the council to sign.
Okay, that's my motion.
I'll
With a
second that.
Did you get that too? Okay. So if there's no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so it carries 3-1 with 1 absent.
Okay, and I'll turn to the board.
I would recommend the school board approve of the same, or consider the same motion for approval of the agreement for the exchange of rights and interests in real property, and authorizing the Chair Elizabeth Fitzgerald to sign the same.
I'll make that motion for the board.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and the motion passes unanimously. And I
Great,
think I
thank
have
you.
some
Thank you very much.
signature pages here.
Do we give that motion?
Do we do this right now?
Okay.
Do you have the master
Yeah, these are two,
Yeah.
right,
I
David?
think
Yes,
I've
those
got
are two clean
These are two, yeah,
master
one for you,
executable
one for
versions.
us.
Excellent.
Approve this.
I have
Yeah,
the
the
articles,
authorization I
actually.
have.
We haven't
Okay.
voted on those
Okay,
yet.
so it's the,
We have a separate signature
David,
page.
This is the,
what is the
this is,
Yes, we voted on the warning last night. but
It would be just us.
Oh, it's, okay, it's,
Today's date is the 5th of September.
Dave, are we doing 2 copies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why they all wear jackets and ties?
Because they're educators, that's why.
thank you. Yeah. We have no official pen.
This is the other one, but you want him to read those, but I think David, right? Or you will. Or
Yeah, I think maybe I'll go ahead and read those.
Could you just clarify one statement that Counselor Chittenden made last night, that an acre of playing fields is going to be turned into a parking lot? Is that accurate?
I think the design is in the packet. I think he's referring to, well, the total amount of the acre includes really 3 easements that we'll discuss in the ballot article right now. But, so it's really a portion up to what you currently probably recall might be the chain link fencing that is on the, I'm bad at, yeah.
Eastern side.
Eastern side, eastern side, yeah. And then I don't know how much of the easement, I haven't seen the most recent design, so I don't know how many spots or so I think it was an overestimate to say a full acre was being turned into parking, or the playing fields themselves.
Megan, I'm looking at the map right now, and it doesn't look like it's quite an acre. Maybe 2/3, not sure, but
I think it was .7 was the actual.
2/3. There you go.
Well, .7, so there are two
It's not all.
easements right together near the playing fields. So how much of it is playing field right now versus other trees or other things that are there? But there's the .7 that would be to the city to do parking and all that. And then there's a portion that will be used for the new roadway and for stormwater and all of that, which is another .1. Now, on the other opposite end of the playing field, it's not even the playing fields, that section is really trees right now. There's a little bit of a forested portion where the new Garden Street would come through, so that's .1. So it's you could say that almost an acre of Rick Marcotte property is being turned into pavement or parking lot or, some other use. But we're not eating up an acre of, my son would never let me vote for something that took up an acre of soccer field at Rick Marcotte. So it's not quite an acre of playing field that's going away. It's more, if,
I asked the question.
yeah.
One thing, Megan, much of that field is not used very often. Usually, what's used most is the part that's closest to the parking lot.
Well, that's not quite the case. So that can be true when you go and you look at recess. But people, community groups use that space. There's a lot of after-school activity that's there. The kids use it for cross-country skiing in the winter. There's, just because, right at recess time, there aren't kids spread out all over that, doesn't mean they're not using it for hands-on nature and for other things. So there is a lot of use, actually, of that
Point
space.
taken, thank you.
I don't know if you want to stay for the ballot language approval, but I'll give you an opportunity to make a graceful exit if you'd like now, or we can
We'd
get.
like to stay.
Okay, we'll stay for this
We're
ballot.
hanging.
Pins and needles.
Okay.
So he's committed on your entire behalf, counsel, so, sorry.
Declining. Yes.
Dissenting vote.
We'll take it.
We'll move to agenda item 7, which is to consider the special school district meeting warning for November 6th. And I'm going to read both these articles, and then I'll take a motion on them. Article 1, and this is really for purposes of the audience at home, and I was counseled to read them, so I will. Article 1 says, shall the South Burlington School Board be authorized to convey to the city of South Burlington 3 easements at the Rick Marcotte Central School property? The first being 7/10 of an acre easement over, upon, and through the southwesterly corner of the property to provide access, limited parking, and stormwater treatment facilities for a new municipal building to be built by the city of South Burlington. The second being a rectangular 1/10 of an acre easement over, upon, and through the easterly side of the aforesaid 7/10 acre easement for a future public roadway and right-of-way, and the third being a triangular 1/10 of an acre easement over, upon, and through the southeasterly corner of the Rick Marcotte School property for a public roadway and right-of-way, the purpose of which is to improve the turning radius for vehicles using the future Garden Street. That is Article 1. Article 2 is if the prior article related to the conveyance of easements passes, and should the City of South Burlington receive all additional necessary voter and permitting approvals to move the city's administrative offices to a new municipal building, shall the South Burlington School Board be authorized to enter into an option to lease that shall run for 180 days from the date the city moves its administrative offices to the new municipal building, and then enter into a 3-year lease with 2 3-year renewal terms, along with an option to acquire the city property located at 575 Dorset Street and its related parking area, not to include the fire department facilities, from the City of South Burlington, provided it is used for school district purposes. So the first article being the 3 easements, the second being the option to lease. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second?
Any further discussion?
I'll just note there's one item we will have to have a, because this is an Australian ballot item, there'll need to be a public informational session before the actual vote on Election Day. We can probably schedule that in conjunction with the cities. That will be November 5th at 7 p.m. And that's not verbatim in the morning, but we will have that public informational session as part of this.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and the motion passes. And should we sign off on this now?
I can present a different copy later that has the language about the public informational session in it too, for posting, so.
All right. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Diane, sorry.
I just wanted to make a comment that I'm really encouraged seeing the city and school collaborate in this way, and it's a very exciting opportunity that we're welcoming. And I would just like to see this happen on an ongoing basis, and I would like to pick up on what you said, Elizabeth, about working sessions and whether that could be possible so that the city and the school could, you know, the steering committees report out what's happening, but a working session could really look at the goals of the district and the goals of the city and where there's alignment of the goals, and just kind of put that collaboration out there, because I think that really increases trust and belief in all of you in the city and in the school district that work really hard on our behalf. And I would just like to increase opportunities between both parties.
Thanks. And I, just as an aside, I had seen the televised version of the second public hearing the city council had, and there seems to be a very strong interest from the community at really understanding a 5 to 10 year master plan on development and what the impact is on schools, on roads, on infrastructure, and so forth. So it seems like a really timely opportunity to kind of start those to be less reporting out, perhaps, and more about interaction. Thanks, Diane. All right, we'll move on to Agenda 8, Superintendent's Report.
So I have 3 items here. The first is a follow-up on a conversation that we had at a previous board meeting on the condom availability and the information in the handbook. So in your packet, it's just an excerpt. It's just a page out of the handbook. We did not copy the whole handbook. It is available online if folks want it, but in there it just outlines the availability program, the purpose of the program, where they can be picked up, and some of the process by which we do that. So I also know Patrick, after the last meeting, Patrick Burke did meet with Paul Lyon. Paul Lyon was an individual who had some questions from the community, and Patrick did set up a meeting, and they have had that meeting. So again, just wanted to let you know that as well. Let me know if you have any questions on that. If hearing none, we'll move on. The next is just an update on the security grants for schools, and again, as you know, the governor had released dollars to put towards school security. We applied for that. We have received the dollars. I think it's a sum total of about $85,000. And I want to let Gary, and again, Gary is, how many weeks are you in now, Gary?
2 months.
Can you come on up and, so to give you a little bit of an update on just some of the things that we've done, because it's not insignificant to our work. And so again, Gary being on board, our office has changed with Director of Operations and Finance, and Amity, who is also here, Business Manager, have been doing a great job in moving us forward. So Gary.
So I will be relatively brief. We were granted $83,859 with a requirement to match 25% or $27,953 for a sum total of work for $111,812. Several security-related projects. I think you are pretty much aware they're grouped into 2 overall projects with entryway security. Window film is window upgrades are the 2 categories, and they support our overall security plan that we have talked about in the past. So very successful preparation for the grant. We were awarded 100% of everything that was available in our applications. So we're pretty happy about that.
Thank you, Gary.
One quick question. Does this offset what was approved in the budget?
I will have to check, because I didn't look at what was approved for security in the budget.
Okay.
To see what percentage it offset.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if it was an offset or additive to do new things, but it'd be nice to clarify that, if that's an upside to
There were
us.
specific things in the grant that you could do. There was, so it wasn't just anything. So
No, but many of them I know we had approved in the budget.
That's right.
I
We
believe.
did, and we executed some of that work in the last fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The period of execution is 1 September to 30 September of 19, and we will finish all that work by then. We're already in the process of scheduling and execution.
Thank
A
you.
couple other quick things just for you to know is that entry into the high school is a little bit different for those of you who've tried to do that. For you, our badges will work, obviously, but during the school day, there's a conscious effort to have students enter and staff enter through the main doors. Why? Because of the double door entry system. It provides a lot more kind of eyes available. And although that's a little bit of an inconvenience for staff that might park on the far eastern side of the big parking lot, to walk all the way around is a little bit of an inconvenience. Maybe not now, although it's been hot. But with inclement weather, it will probably be a little bit more inconvenient. But that's something that has changed. And Patrick and the administration, Gary, have been encouraging that to happen as a utilization of the double door entry as well. As the middle school, really, that is kind of the main entry, and it's not as used, after or before school starts as much as the high school different doors are. So
is it possible are you locking all the other doors and not allowing the car to unlock them? Is that possible to do if you want to shuffle everybody into?
yeah, so currently everyone who holds a badge has access, and all the doors are currently locked after students are here. We can make that happen, and the high school is working through that currently. All the other schools are not, and I will say that we have more conversations that need to happen. I'm not in favor of not allowing badges to work because if we enter or exit a school site, I want people to be able to get back in if they need to at the nearest door that has a key scan area. A little bit more involved, and we could certainly talk more with anyone who has more questions around that. But I've always felt like our bus drivers, for instance, dropping students off late or needing to get students into a different location. I think it's an important component to safety and security that we don't disallow entrance, but we allow decision-making around safety and security stuff. Yep. Anything else, Gary, to
I'll
Perfect.
stay for the
Yep.
next item if you
Yeah,
need.
yeah. Okay, so other paper articles. Again, this is more of a board update on where you are and where you're going. So also at your place is the schedule. So,
Yeah, we probably should add the next couple of months here. I'd say one thing, I get the reminders from Carol at the other paper, and we are kind of routinely asking for extra days, so I don't know if anybody has a better suggestion, but I guess I'd just like to ask whoever has responsibility for the article to kind of plan almost a week ahead to get it through review from the rest of the board and get it in on time, because the good news is the paper's been very flexible, but the paper has changed ownership too, and I'm not sure we're going to continue to have that flexibility. So I just want to remind all of us, if you're signed up, we probably need to kind of put that into our own calendars a little bit more ahead of time.
Being as I'm the next one, I have a question. I haven't seen student outcomes yet. So when I talked to Stuart about it last spring, he said that sometime in September we would be seeing results of last year's testing and all of that. And it's on my agenda to reach out to Mike. But have we seen? Has there been?
there is some data that's now in, so you could get some of that. Not to stop. That needs to happen, but I think given what we have ahead of us around some of the communications in city and school stuff, maybe there's a reorganizing of some of this.
That's what I'm just a little concerned. I'm happy to go ahead and do it. It might be better if we're just now getting the data trickling in, if I have a little bit more time to analyze it.
Well, I should
properly.
definitely have you connect with Mike and myself and make sure that, and then you can make a decision, but you've got to, this timeline's coming. I'm not wanting to say not to keep that deadline.
Right.
But that may make a determining factor of what you have available.
Well, given that you've mentioned it, and we're kind of running up to November, maybe this could be a city-school collaboration topic.
Yeah,
And
I'd be happy to write that one
yeah,
too.
you
That
could
would be fine.
You could do
Okay.
that pretty easily.
Okay.
Is the
Well-
board amenable to maybe holding off on the student outcomes and kind of the update of the culmination of this process on the ballot items and the land exchange?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, why don't we do that?
Yep, okay.
So additional topics, so something that would run in early December and something that would run in early January. I mean, we're smack in budget season,
Yeah.
so. Do you think we should consider a dedicated article on tuition students? Because that seems to be an area we spend a lot of time discussing during budget.
Yeah, and maybe master planning and visioning could be in here too, around just a dedicated article of providing some summary. I mean, you're going to
Well,
have
is it
more
going to be,
conversation.
I guess, to me, I feel like both of these are going to be leading right up into budget approval time, so I feel like they should be supportive of
What we're doing. Yeah.
major budget initiatives. I mean, that's just my bias, but.
Well, the other thing, though, is that with master planning and visioning, once we choose an architect, we're going to need some public cooperation in the visioning process and some input. So it might be good sooner rather than later to have an article about master plan vision, just so we can get that done if we have any hope of getting anything into next year's budget in that regard.
I just know there's a
Put that
lot.
after Budget 101?
Well, that's my question, too. I don't have the picture of the timeline in my head as to, we're pushing to try to.
Well, I think, one of the things that we've done well in the past, board, some budget kind of direction. And, I've got both Amity and Gary here. I think kind of Budget 101 going out to the public, coinciding with some directions that the board is looking for based on, kind of tax implications and things of that nature and outcomes you want to see, and all of that could work nicely with that. So I think you probably could keep the Budget 101 with a little flair on it, maybe for talking about budget expectations once,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And then get into master planning and visioning for the next one.
So, I'm confused where we are. Are we doing tuition students or outcomes? Where are student outcomes?
So I think we're going to do 927 will be city-school collaboration.
Right.
Then 1025, we're going to do budget 101 / budget expectations. So I put master planning and visioning on the 1122. And we could, I think student outcomes would be good in anything that runs up to the budget approval. So it could be anything up to the 228.
Yeah, so,
Right.
Well, although, I'm just trying to think of the date when town meeting is. Well, is 3/7 before or after town meeting?
That'll be after, oh
It's,
yeah,
yeah,
that'll
2
be
days
after,
after.
actually.
Yeah, so it really,
there's only
student
two.
outcomes really needs to
Yeah,
be.
there's only 2 meetings.
In January or February,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would-
Assuming they're good, right?
room for improvement.
Otherwise, maybe March.
Yes, but always room for improvement.
Yeah.
So is there anything that would naturally follow? So from a sequencing standpoint, we have Budget 101, we'll have Master Planning and Visioning, Student Outcomes will be one of the next 2, and is there another topic in there that makes sense?
Well, we can always do the traditional, what does a board member do?
Oh, leading up to the election,
Right,
yeah.
a little bit of
So that,
school
That would be,
board.
that would be the 1227 one,
yeah, so we'll do a board role and responsibility,
right.
okay? And then do the student outcomes after that.
Yeah.
Okay, volunteers. I will do either of the latter 2.
I can do the city-school collaboration, Bridget, so since will be lined up for student outcomes or,
But student outcomes isn't until like
Yeah.
next year, so
Ooh.
I'm happy to do city-school collaboration. I haven't,
I'm trying to decide what I really want to do, master planning or city-school collaboration. Let's see.
well,
master
city-school
planning.
collaboration might fall a little bit more, well, I mean, you've been working on master planning and visioning there too, yeah.
Why don't I do city-school collaboration,
Okay.
because my timing towards the end of November is a little,
Okay, so we have Martin on
is that all
the
right? Are you okay
927.
with that, to do
I'm
master-
totally fine with that,
Okay.
yeah.
Budget. We had Steve and Bridget, are we keeping?
Yeah, I'm fine
You
to,
too? Okay.
I'm fine to work together on that, yep.
Okay.
And then I would do master
Then
planning and
Bridget will
visioning
do
right after
that.
that. yeah.
Okay, and I can do either the other 2.
School board role.
Feel like I should volunteer for the board roles and responsibilities. Kind of is my swan song.
Song, what are you talking about?
All right, so we'll have
Just in
Steve
case.
and Elizabeth, so. All right, so we have 5 topics then: city school collaboration, budget 101, master planning and visioning, board roles and responsibilities, and student outcomes. And it's Martin, Steve and Bridget, Steve, and me.
There we go.
All right, so Alex, you're going to be up in February, whatever the topic is.
Well, you know what? I've got a topic in the top of my head right now. And that would be tobacco legislation, or perhaps you could expand it to substance abuse.
Should we put it as a placeholder?
Sure. The legislature will be in session.
All right, did you get all those?
Yep.
So Elizabeth, the board roles and responsibilities is for the January 3rd issue.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's for, I think that-
Yeah.
It's
about
for
right, isn't it?
publication
Yeah,
in
that's
the
right.
January
Yep.
3rd, yes.
you have until then to decide what to do.
Right?
Are you reconsidering?
No, I was just thinking I've got to make it really enticing.
Yes, you do. Yeah, because signatures actually for any open seats would be due like around January 20th,
January
right?
10th, I think. Is it 10th?
No, it's
Oh,
always
it can't
later
be that
than
early. No, I
Like
think
the
it's the
20th.
the 29th or
Third
30th.
week, I
Yeah.
think.
30th.
Towards
Thereabouts,
January.
yeah.
Okay.
Pinewood
that's-
Derby, Alex, right?
Hmm?
Pinewood Derby,
Oh, that's right.
right about that time.
Yeah.
It's
I
good
missed
lead
that.
time. All right, anything else on the superintendent's report, David?
It's very fun.
All right, we'll move to agenda item 9, consider the transportation agreement with Winooski School District.
So just a quick recap
Here for
to
master
you,
planning and visioning.
board members. This came up last meeting. and it was warned for action, but
Steve
there
and
were some
Elizabeth
questions that
is
came up
next.
around kind of the outcomes, if you will, around what the program served. So Gary actually worked with Sean McMahon, the superintendent at Winooski, provided you a little information, and he can also, elaborate if you so wish, but you see the details here. Gary, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, or?
Nothing significant, although it was viewed as a great success from Sean's perspective at Winooski. Really met their intent. The length, the slight increase in the contracted days was their original intent, which was budgeted for this year. So it's pretty straightforward. They felt that student outcomes were improved, attendance was improved through the service.
I have one quick question, and it was, I've probably read the contract a half a dozen times, but I was rereading it again in preparation for tonight. I just had a question, and I'm not saying change anything in the contract, but what happens on a day where both districts might need to close early? Because there's a little clause, number 6, that talks about if they need to close early, we'll provide transportation home early for their kids. Like, so what happens if a snowstorm pops up and we're both closing early? How do we prioritize resources, and what happens in that situation?
Okay, so they would take 2 buses. We have spares. We would make the necessary adjustments with our driver pool.
Okay. That was my only question. Great.
And I had 2 quick questions. They're very minor on the agreement. One is under 2, and it's specific to maintenance, but it indicates that Winooski reserves the right at any time, and I'm just going to read the part that just caught my eye, to have its representatives ride any bus as a passenger. And I just wondered if there's restrictions to that when students are involved.
And what section is that?
It's
Elizabeth?
section
2.
2, second paragraph. I mean, it's talking about inspecting any and all buses, but then it says ride any bus as a passenger, and that struck me
So,
as.
we did talk about this one a little bit when it was initially came out, but the representatives was something that is would be a requirement of their administration. Like, you can't, we don't want just anybody, being the Winooski School District representative, just walk on the bus, because that's a concern to student safety. So it would need to be named a representative to just be checking our buses. They do have monitors that are on their buses. I don't think they exactly call them monitors, but they are, I think, that dedicated liaison that is kind of helping to make sure that safety at the bus stops, and also bus driver and bus maintenance for those purposes are done. So I believe they're the representatives.
And that's to verify the condition and serviceability of the vehicles.
Okay. And then one other minor question is under 3, the routes that will transport students to and from, and it has Winooski School District school buildings. Are there multiple facilities?
Not that I know of.
I didn't either.
You know that.
I just was sort of like, I thought it was just a building.
Yeah, so we could take that plural.
Well, I guess my question was, were there alternative sites that we were committing to with this transportation agreement?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, all right. Yeah, last time I saw it was the building. Sorry, those were little
Yep.
things, but
That's helpful, yeah.
being born in Winooski, I know that stuff.
So again, I think in general, I said it last time, be quick, this allows us to continue to do the work that we need to do to transport students. It is a nice collaborative effort that, 2 school districts in near proximity can work collaboratively. I'd love to see this happen more in and around Vermont, and I think this is a good example of us being able to do this with our resources, not overextending us, but being able to do that. I hope that more will unfold in the future. So I'm in favor.
And David, I think one thing to point out, this is either revenue neutral or cost neutral, I guess you could say, for South Burlington, or a minor
Yeah, this agreement,
profit.
this agreement does not hinder South Burlington taxpayers. It actually covers our expenses and has resources that also cover risks. So if
Yeah.
fuel costs go up or down, it has
A little bit of
some
contingency in
built-in
there. Yeah.
triggers in there that we have. So we think, again, it's a positive thing. It also allows us to use these buses when they're not in service for Winooski, and we've been able to add to our fleet as a result with newer buses.
Yeah, and the one other question I'd have, or just a request, would be, I don't know if it was difficult to pull the data together that sort of supported the improved or attendance, but I would ask that Winooski do provide that again for the period of time that.
Sean did say that it would be a lot easier going forward. It was a little difficult for the first year, but they will be able to provide more detail in subsequent years.
Great. Martin, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna offer a motion,
All right.
if you want the motion.
Would you like to make that motion?
I move that we approve the transportation joint agreement with the one change of making buildings singular.
Second.
Thanks, Mark.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, master planning and visioning.
So, you have a lot in your packet here in your information, so there's some things in here that I just wanted to highlight for you. First is that we had under phase 2, we had a committee that was formed that had representation from the high school, the middle school, and school board. And we interviewed 3 firms. The 3 firms went through the process of answering questions and actually doing a presentation. 4, excuse me, yes, 4.
Sorry.
Going to be in trouble with the 4th, yeah. So, yes, 4. And we did that over the course of 2 days and had a rating process that we used to evaluate each of the 4 firms, and have come to the conclusion to recommend Dorr and Whittier as the recommended firm to move us through phase 2. That's the first part, which is called for action this evening. The second part is really an update on the master planning and visioning work, which required some additional work around the threshold analysis for all of the other options. So in your packet is, although there are excerpts kind of out of what will be now included in your book, but providing you with some updated information on enrollment, and then the threshold analysis pages, that went along with that. So the one thing I wanted to just point out to you is it's a little hard when you look at the options, the way we've done them, is you don't have which the options are. So I apologize, and I just gave you a quick kind of cheat sheet to look at option 1 through option 5. So I apologize for not including that on there. So anyway, that's where I'm at. Again, page 1 was a little synopsis of where we were. You get into the graphs. Again, I want to be sensitive to not talking without listening to some of your questions. Capacity analysis, I think when you look at Rick Marcotte, Chamberlain, and Orchard, you can see some things that pop right out to you based on the years as we move forward around looking at capacity allocation and or where there may be trouble spots, i.e. Orchard, you can see on the continuum of 2018 current out to 2028. So again, this is a process that some recommendations to isolate the schools and show the actual enrollment and demographic projections based on that particular area. So I don't know if there's specific questions that you have. A lot of information, again, coming at you. What I am proposing, unless you tell me differently, is that I would come back to you on September 26th, our next school board meeting, and provide you with my suggested or recommended next steps. Obviously, you've got a lot of the option data that's been presented. You've got the threshold pieces that now have been provided. My plan is to provide you with a recommended next step at September 26th meeting.
recommended next step for dealing with the,
Would be the recommended next step, based on all of the options, what I would see is a suggestion on how you would move forward.
With a specific option or with the process of phase two?
Well, it would be, phase two would be a part of it. Again, I'm needing to listen to you more tonight, but it would factor in information from phase two. But what would be the suggested next step that we want to then begin to mull over more, you as a board, around what would be the preferred option? We've done the threshold analysis, we've looked at point values, we've taken in kind of the mitigation, or what would go away if we did this. So I'm trying to kind of narrow that focus a little bit to arrive at a much more concise recommendation for you folks.
so is a recommendation premature until we find out really what we're gonna be doing with Chamberlain? As far as,
Well, that would,
as far as getting the mitigation, or is that kind of, I mean, it seems, I'm a little concerned if we get a recommendation next meeting, if we haven't fully laid out.
the recommendation, I believe, can't be absent of the things that we're still awaiting.
Okay.
Phase two, some things related to Rick Marka, which we just talked about, and Chamberlain. I'm fine to just kind of let those happen, but part of what we're trying to do is also plan to the future and not allow things to just unnecessarily wait. So,
Let me ask you, I mean, so is the recommendation more of, what the recommendation is on the contingency, plan as far as what the next steps are? I guess I'm
I
still,
think your contingency plan currently, is, well, if you're looking at Chamberlain, that contingency plan is based on sound proofing, and currently that's moving forward. So my recommendation would be, that would be factored into that. Making assumptions that those are moving forward, we would be able to do the following next steps, right? So I see it as kind of some sequencing. I do feel like there's a need to provide some additional clarity. We've had options on the table. We need to keep this conversation, I think, active. Not everybody knows all of the pieces that are in there, and I don't want to get necessarily to, a date way in the future and make a recommendation. I think we need to be talking about it along the way.
Dave, oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was a good time to maybe address what Martin was alluding to.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I don't know if we've had a subsequent special meeting where we talked about the outcome of that
Last,
meeting on the 29th at the airport.
the technical advisory.
Technical Advisory Committee meeting, because I do think a couple of decision points or dates where we will have some relatively significant information became available, particularly, I think it was December 4th and 5th, that they are going to have the new noise exposure
Right.
map.
NEMs, yeah.
So, and regardless, I mean, I don't think that we will have proceeded with the sound insulation on Chamberlain. We're still working through that grant
That would
process.
be a May, if, in best case scenario.
Right, best case scenario, you're doing that next summer. But regardless of that workflow, if in fact Chamberlain lands at the 75 or higher dB DNL line, we are eligible for purchase. And in fact, what they also said is that that is the recommended approach. If you fall at or above the 75 dB DNL, their first.
Who is
sort of-
they, Steve?
I'm sorry, the FAA.
FAA.
Yeah, as far as remediation, they actually recommend purchase. So there's no, I mean, that's not saying that we will. It's just that I think December 4th and 5th. I think 4th is when they'll let the advisory committee know, and then 5th is the public hearing, so.
That's a pretty critical date.
It is a pretty good node. It still leaves out the possibility that we may decide at a future date, notwithstanding the non-availability of FAA money to purchase, that we need to move anyway. But I think, Martin, to your point, that's a pretty critical node that became available to us on the 29th last week.
We did bring up the avigation easement too. That was something that you spoke to, that there was concerns. And so that was, I think, appropriately responded to verbally, again,
Right.
we'll want to make sure we get those things documented, but we never want to give up the opportunity for those that are listening. If we do soundproof, we don't want to give up the opportunities that might prevail on a school facility that might put it in a not a positive place if we were to sell it.
I guess that's it, is we don't waive our rights for that
Okay.
particular
Okay,
remedy.
fine. That
But
was
further, we're gonna know before we would undertake any
And
soundproofing.
what's the expectation of timing to get the results that were done in August testing?
Those, I think, all factor into the timeline that Steve spoke about, which is that December timeframe. So the data gets put together and discerned.
I thought those were
the
pretty
NEM.
independent.
I wasn't entirely clear whether the
Yeah.
NEMs coming out on the 4th and 5th of December would inform the
Yeah.
sound insulation workflow. I kind of thought that was under the existing.
I think it's
noise
kind of a
exposure
two-part,
map.
but it's still under the NEM umbrella, and so, I don't know how much additional lead time we'll have for that, but.
Yeah, and I guess, sort of just with the benefit of a week to think about it, were we to fall above that 75 or at or above that 75 dBDNL, I think from a public relations standpoint, we'd sort of be obliged to move, I think.
Yeah.
So, it's hard for me.
So I hear, I'm not wanting to say that there's a definitive, like, this is the only go-to option. I'm trying to provide some clarity around, we've got 5 options. Given what we currently have on our plate, I'll say, whether it's sound insulation, soundproofing, Rick Marcotte property move, there's probably some narrowing of our focus around what are the next steps. Evaluate and consider options around Chamberlain. Evaluate the updated demographics based on some of the more recent developments. Options, X and X can probably go away. I think we need to focus on these 3 and narrow in our data and our research on those.
So, I find, this is good information, and I'm really pleased with how we've been doing with the threshold criteria, and also, looking back at what the board, a year and a half ago or so, set out
Requested,
as the steps and such. But I'm very concerned about getting a recommendation at this point.
It's not a recommendation,
Okay.
just
that's
some
what
suggestions
Well,
around where we're going.
What I would like to see are 2 things. Let me throw these out there, and I'm sorry, because I know that. 2 things. First of all, I think that what I'd be looking for is a process and the key points of decision to get to that recommendation, more so than a final recommendation. How are we going to actually get to that? That's one thing. And the second is, I do think we should roll up our sleeves, committee members, sit down with administration before presentation to the whole board as far as what that recommendation or next steps are. I'm just a little concerned to make sure that have all the ducks in a row, so to speak.
Because it feels to me like there's, I totally agree with what Martin said, and I felt like when I saw these options kind of laid out for discussion, there's been sort of a step missing, because it was very clear in our resolutions that we were to design the threshold analysis and monitor that threshold analysis. We haven't really had a clear discussion that the threshold analysis is triggered, and now we need to reopen the discussion about the elementary schools as a whole and consolidation as a whole. And that's what this feels like we're doing, and that's what I would be very concerned if we were to, on the 26th, get a recommendation that it's time to consolidate all the elementary schools. Again, I think we're steps, we're steps, well, it was just concerning because it sort of made it sound like some of these things that are out there, as Steve was saying, more information in December about Chamberlain, some of these other steps that are gonna happen in the interim. It sort of sounded like perhaps we were gonna get a recommendation before we even knew that, and I was like, well, that's kind of presupposing what the recommendation will be. And as Martin said, I feel like as a subcommittee, we need to sort of have a chat about, what the next steps are before we really talk about that again.
Yeah, I would have to concur. I'm looking at these, and I don't disagree that if there's something that could be eliminated from discussion, like I'm looking at option 1, which is sort of a status quo scenario. I'm not sure we've seen any evidence that says we should do nothing. So, I mean, if I'm looking at that and saying, okay, if you're going to eliminate and get it down to 4, I don't see a problem with that. But based on obvious things, the step, as I'm thinking through this, that I'm starting to, really think more about, which I think, Bridget, you alluded to, is where do we start pulling in the community and articulating, before we get to any specific option recommendation, articulate, and the way I'm thinking about it is sort of, these are known issues that need to be dealt with in a pretty short period of time, or have very well-defined contingency plans that we could trigger as needed. And I think we'll have data, you mentioned a date certain, Steve, that I think is critical. I think the next one is anticipated issues, whether they're problems or opportunities that we would like to present to the community and provide recommendations on. And that's a little bit longer view. So it's kind of and maybe that's all it is there. Maybe it's a 5-year window and a 5 to 10-year window. I don't know the right timing, but one has a little bit more concrete nature to it, and the other has, and I see things in there like the orchard issue with space, and just saying, okay, there's maybe a host of solutions that could be triggered quickly, like redistricting, maybe new developments go to a different location, whatever it might be. So there's a host of solutions to that might be acceptable, but those could be discussed with the community. And then others are a little bit more forward-thinking of directionally, we see this kind of going on. So.
I just also, I'm a little concerned that we need a little more discussion about what the options even are on the table before they're in front of the community, because this is going to be confusing. I have to say, as I read through them, it's confusing because we had 5 options the last time we kind of went through a real discussion of the elementary schools, and these don't line up with them necessarily. In some ways they do, but the, close Chamberlain only and keep the other 2 open is not one of these options, and we need to discuss why that is. And, as Elizabeth said, sort of say, here are the problems, here are the ones that really need to be addressed in the short term, and then here are the potential solutions to, that, and then how would that fit with a long-term plan?
And I feel like that would frame, I'm looking at the work that we've just gone through with the land exchange agreement. I think we did articulate that really, really well, and I think the counselors validated that. They really appreciated the articulation of what the benefits were to the school district, and we did put a lot of thought into that. I would like to see that same level of thought around what solutions do these options bring, and so that it's pretty clear they all are addressing either in whole or a part of the solution, but where they fit. Because right now, these options come across as it's not a description of what it's solving. I guess that's, I'm not saying it very well, but
this was only to give you title to the untitled piece. They weren't really, it's created a little confusion, I'm afraid, but nonetheless, I'm hearing what you're saying. Just to kind of recapture, when I opened this up, it was really about suggested next steps. And I am need to be very sensitive and clear that this was not about proposing an option. And so really about suggested next steps, which you've given me some good additional information around what suggested next steps would be, to include some committee work, to, some data collection, to affirming kind of our overall objective. So that's good. I think that needs to continue to keep moving forward. We need to keep talking about this, because we also know that when things come to whatever that decision date will be, we want to try to eliminate that this is the first I've ever heard of it scenario. And so having it before, the community, and hopefully having people engage in our conversation will be important, or engage with you out in the public will be important. So again, I absolutely hear what you're saying, and I'm very sensitive right now to the fact of just me saying suggested next steps kind of equaled very quickly to suggested options. And I think you're based on some past.
I was triggered.
No, so I get it. I need to be extremely sensitive about how we move forward.
That's probably a good barometer. You triggered several of us.
Yeah, I did.
So-
Yeah.
So, it would be nice to have the subcommittee, I guess that'd be Bridget and me, to
Mhm.
get together, because it has been a little while,
Mhm.
and if we're getting to this point where we do have to all figure out the next steps, I think it'd be a good time to do that.
Good.
I mean, it seems like one in isolation is just getting to work on the high school. None of what we're talking about here. I mean, there may be, certain scopes of work, but it doesn't seem like any of these configurations perturb, the fact that it's still a 9 through 12 building. You can relatively well plan for the capacity, and it's more about design and prioritization. I think all of these seem to touch, with the exception of option 1, do seem to touch Tuttle. And so that, becomes part of the mix. And I think is just as a comment as far as principles, and I am reaching way back to long before I was on the school board, and another school board member dragged me to a meeting. But I think two principles that I recall with respect to possible future configurations. And so I just think if addressing some concepts, one was the notion of avoiding, if we were able, or minimizing the number of breakpoints or building transitions.
Student
And so
transitions,
if right now we have 3. And if we go to a pre-K 2, 3 to 5, 6, 7, 8, and high school, there are now 4,
Right.
or 3 transitions, I guess, from 2. And then the other was, an aversion to consolidating, kind of like, I guess it would be Allenbrook School, for example, is a giant, K2. But there was some preference, I think, articulated for more localized elementary buildings. Whether that's 2 or 3, I don't know. But I think there was a little bit of an aversion to having the, K through maybe up to 4 population all in a single building. I don't exactly remember why, but I think if we could just kind of revisit
Number of
those.
those conversations, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm right, Bridget, is that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There were a lot of other issues too, but yes, those were 2 of the big ones. But
Yeah.
yes, there were lots of bullet points under the why not one big school, but yeah.
But I imagine the administrative ease is one reason for, like
That's one
assignment
very
of
big reason.
faculty, not having to send them from one building to another, but just reassign within
And
the
cost,
building.
there were some cost pieces in there too,
Sure.
obviously, right?
Now,
with,
replication of physical
yep.
plant, all those things, so.
And collaboration amongst teachers in terms of curriculum, being the same in all the schools and the teachers working with each other across grade levels. There are definitely benefits to it
Right.
as well, but yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have this warrant for action. Is that-
Is that for selecting?
It's
board
for the Dorn
Dorn
Whittier, selection of the architect firm.
Do we,
So,
do
do you
we
want me to
have
make
something on?
Dorn Whittier?
Yeah, but was there a specific recommendation with a
There was not the write-up in the packet.
estimate or anything?
It was not. It's a contingent upon their proposal that they submitted. That has not changed. Dor Whittier, again, was one of the 4 interview groups. And I don't know, Bridget, if you have anything more you wanted to add?
I mean, it would have probably made sense to sort of revisit what the prices were. The prices were very similar
Yeah.
across the board, basically because we kind of said to the 4 groups
Upon this-
originally, when they bid for phases 1 and 2, this is what the total budget
right.
is, so you kind of have to figure out what you can
Yeah.
offer within that budget and go forward with that, so.
So this is an approved budget item at this point.
It is.
So,
It is.
It is.
so would you like to make a motion?
I move that we award phase 2 of the architecture work on master planning and visioning to Dor Whittier.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Great, thank you.
And we satisfied the committee work update component
Yes.
here.
Mhm.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 11, executive limitations policy monitoring on 2.2, treatment of staff.
On the subcommittee?
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Mhm. You got it. So what you have in here is the 2.2, with some of the data changed to reflect what's happened since the last period. I'm happy to try to go through it. The highlighted yellow are the areas that have changed.
I think you bounced ahead and from your interpretation
Well, I'm
That-
trying
that-
to move fast for you.
No,
on that.
well, I'm sure this is an egregious condition.
It
The one
sounds
that
pretty
you-
egregious,
you-
quarterly meetings.
Yeah, I agree that quarterly meetings for mid-level managers to discuss issues, concerns, and planning is in fact one of the egregious conditions. But I don't think that's what you meant.
Yeah, I got you, yeah.
So I
Right.
think that
Yeah,
needs to be reworded.
That's
There are
correct.
some people that believe.
When I read it, I thought, yeah, okay.
You probably don't want
Probably-
that there.
But I didn't think that he meant it.
yeah.
So anyway, yes.
Thank you, Martin. Got it. You know, I think evaluations are probably something that you'd like some more information on. Mike Martin is here with us tonight, our Director of Learning, and we do have a plan in place. At some point, you're going to want to know, because this is an identified area of non-compliance, how we're going to get ourselves into compliance. This has tended to be a kind of an ongoing issue, and it's a requirement of me to get this into compliance. There's several factors that happen as a result, but nonetheless, we need to figure it out so that we can have these in a more timely manner. So I don't know if you want to go a little bit on this, and maybe Mike, some of your thoughts on currently where we are and where we're going might be helpful. And why don't you come on up, Mike, to the table. And those of you that haven't had a chance to meet Mike Martin, both he and Gary have been doing an outstanding job. They're still weeks into their job, but I think it probably feels like months and months, but hopefully not. But again, I just felt like this would at least be a little opportunity to talk a little bit more about something that we're really trying to put a huge emphasis on a going forward. It's all about instruction. It's all about making those connections. It's always been that, but I think there's a resurgence of that currently happening. So Mike, welcome, and give a little bit of an update. Board, happy to have you ask questions specific to this particular area.
Sure. So I'm still getting up to speed, as you can imagine, just getting into my new role. But we use the Danielson framework for our teacher evaluations, and that's a kind of a industry standard. And the thing about evaluations is they're critical. They're really, it's not just about quality control, it's also about our teachers learning through the process. And so I think what we're seeing with sort of a persistent backlog is that they're really labor intensive. There's a pre-meeting, there are rules around the actual observation itself, and then there's a post, and then there's a formal summative write-up. So this year, for the first time, Principal Holly Ruel piloted a new model, and really the leadership team hasn't had time to debrief and unpack that model to figure out what are the advantages, what's working, what's not. So I think going forward, I think that's going to be something we're going to be looking at is what are the most important elements of the evaluation system, and where's there maybe some wasted effort or some really labor-intensive aspects that we could streamline.
So is there a timeline to debrief on that process and consider implementing it?
Yeah, I think our next meeting it's going to be on the agenda of our next meeting, which is 2 weeks out.
Okay. So am I reading this correctly, that of the 110 evaluations due, 30 completed were received?
Correct.
And then what's the time frame on these?
Typically, we ask for them to be in, now, before now. The problem is there are some, so I'm reporting, obviously, non-compliance. We do, we're gonna get more than the 30, but this is the time of this report. Some of them are pending signatures and some sit-down conversations. So this is what typically happens is through the process is that you have observations, you have write-ups, you have some goals, and then you have these more final meetings, and getting the process completed leads to the backlog. The other part is we've had a fair amount of turnover. Again, we've got to be careful that it's not all about retirements or turnover or somebody who started, was on the evaluation cycle, no longer here. So there's some of that as well, but I'm not wanting to, I'm giving you the data here. We're non-compliant at the time of this current report. And I do think it's going to be important for us to come back, as I said here, and update you in October where we are and kind of how we're moving forward as a compliance.
Yeah, this one, I mean, it's hard to say if this is a snapshot or if there were, my concern would be that, this is over a year, for instance, and you're basically saying there were no milestones along the way where it could have been noted that, okay, phase one wasn't met, so there's intervention that happens there of some kind. So that's a little bit alarming to me. But the other component, as I'm sure both of you are very aware, from a management standpoint, that a lack of an evaluation kind of triggers a whole cycle of not dealing in a timely manner with performance issues or training and professional development. I mean, you can go on, and then it's a big catch-up, at which I don't know, the possibility of what can happen during that period of time is concerning. But I recall one of the times we did this monitoring report, it was a similar situation. I don't know if it was this order of magnitude, and I'm going to assume this is a snapshot versus, like you said, there's probably some that are just waiting a signature, but we also have to look at the trend. Is this something, we might be good for a year, and then within 3 years, we're out of cycle again. So what is happening? And I do appreciate, it's always seemed to me that process that requires such formal notification and so forth seems a little onerous, but that's just.
I think Mike's addressing that. One is we need to recognize the cohort of teachers that are moving through the system. And if it's so frequent and you can't get out and you got too many, you got to figure out how to do that. So, and as you know, we've had increased number of folks retiring, which means you have an increased number of people coming in, which means they have to be in a 2-year period of evaluation, right? Because they're on probation, so you have to do this. So it kind of has that, it has an effect there that we need to figure that out. And a different methodology that provides good, concise feedback that allows people to, be rewarded for their hard work and given growth work is really an important part. I would say on a general sense, as a district, as we continue to move around professional development, and we've held people accountable to many of those areas around implementation, curriculum work, I feel we're pretty solid there. We've been diligent, I believe, about helping people who are not doing well. We've worked hard to have improvement plans in place, and we've done, I think, really good due diligence there. The worry, of course, that you see is, based on what you're looking at, of the 110, did any of them have any touch points? My belief is they've all had touch points or connections, but it's not been completed. There's a lot of different evaluation methods out there, from Marzano to Danielson, as Mike said, which is what we have. But it's up to us to, talk about whether we need to reschedule certain folks. If you've been here a long time and there's not, we can approach and say, we'd like to push you out 1 year because we've got, a large number here. But again, we need to be transparent about that and with everyone, including you, the board. So.
For anything from the fact that the date last year was November 1st, so are we a little ahead of the cycle? I mean, if you take another month and a half, is it likely to?
It's not the way this works, though. This is on your report. So under policy governance, this is where we are. Yeah, I think it will look different in a month, when we report in October. But I think, to what Elizabeth said, it's an issue. I have an issue, and that's why Mike's here tonight too. And we put some time into this to figure out how we're going to not just have this be a reoccurring situation. We have to do a better job, and I have to, if it's administrators that are not, I have to be holding them accountable. It's important, you know, it's a really important work around moving our district forward.
I think there's definitely like a capacity issue with principals too. So one thing we should be looking at is what's keeping principals from getting out in the classroom more often, and are there ways we can address that capacity issue? So.
So just to add two more sentences worth to the discussion. So I also find that making sure that we're doing the performance reviews on a timely basis and that they're effective ties, perhaps not directly, but certainly indirectly, to our whole compensation system, that we compensate our teachers by them getting more experience on an annual basis, unless they're on a performance plan, or that's the main reason why they wouldn't get advanced. But with more education, with the more experience, that we're paying them more. And the check on this whole thing is really twofold. One is the performance evaluations to help assure the community that's paying for the teacher's salary that teachers are improving, that they are in fact being given the feedback so that their performance can improve. And just as importantly, is actually not something directly related to this, but is the teachers who are struggling being put on performance improvement plans, and if they can't improve, that they are shown to the door. Prefer to have them improve, but so I think that those things are critical even as we're going into our next negotiation, because I really do think that it kind of supports how we're compensating our teachers. So my 2 cents.
What reading is this one on here?
First.
This is first, so we do not have to take action on this. Is there additional information other than updating that component if we hold off on this?
No,
Yeah,
I think,
we should go through it.
yeah, and there may be other things I just did not want to have you ask me that. I wanted to bring it up, surface it, and Mike also, we expected and wanted you to have this, we wanted to be able to share this with you. There's probably other things in here as well on climate and things of that nature that are also in here, grievances, you know, part of the things I report. So there may be other questions that you have, and we can bring it back, you know, at the next.
In a couple places. For example, there were no new reported incidents of discrimination against staff members. Part of the next paragraph got marked out, but then it still talks about the second incident and the third incident. It just feels like maybe it needs a.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 7 out of 10, and it's the only bullet point that's on the dark bullet point that's there. So it just feels like maybe it could just use a proofread before we see it again. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm stuck on the egregious meetings. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
All right, so we'll move that one forward.
Thank you, guys.
Agenda item 12, the VSBA's resolutions. Thank you for getting those to us.
Yeah.
So, do you mind if I give you a background?
Go ahead.
So this could be actually fairly straightforward right now and fairly quick, because the main thing is that whoever is going to, and I'm not sure who all is going to be at the VSBA meeting.
I will be there, but I typically don't vote on the resolutions.
Okay,
so.
is anybody else?
I'm planning to go this year.
Okay, so either Bridget or me, and I would recommend Bridget as a clerk, would be representing us and would have our boards vote on these resolutions. And what I would, and we need to give her.
We need to designate that.
Yeah, we need to designate somebody. I would suggest we designate Bridget as the clerk, but we also need to give you some feedback as far as where the board is. And I would suggest, rather than going over these all right now, I would suggest that we follow the lead of the vote of the VSBA, because the VSBA will get these resolutions from different school boards. Then a subcommittee on which I actually served and met in July we go over all of these and we decide whether to recommend that it pass or recommend that it not pass, or sometimes not take a position or ask somebody to withdraw it because it's covered elsewhere. So those are the things that we do. And then this then goes to the full board of the Vermont School Board Association to vote on those recommendations. So at the meeting, we'll have all these in October, and we'll have the recommendation. My suggestion is that we, by default, we should say, yeah, we're fine with what the recommendation of the VSBA is. But we should put this back on the calendar for the 5th, or, no, not the 5th, that's where we are now, next week, or the following. We have 2 meetings that we can get this in on, in case any of us want to specifically talk about one of these resolutions because we don't agree with the recommendation. Yeah, that would be how I would approach this, rather than going through every single one of these tonight. Because I think I agree with, I voted with, they were not all unanimous, but they were pretty heavily voted, and it's a long list of the people who are on this. It's like half of the board. I did not have a problem with any of the recommendations. So me as one, at least, but I'd like to certainly get everybody else's input, or have Bridge get everybody's input on that. Now, there may be, and we're gonna have to, at that meeting, there may be additional resolutions that are brought forward at the meeting. Those are not often voted on. The proposer usually brings them the following year instead, because there won't be any recommendation one way or another from the committee, and that sometimes makes it a little harder for these things to pass. But I think, again, we need to give Bridget or somebody on the board, designate to have to make that decision on our behalf, so.
Yeah, when I read through it, I know there were a couple, although I'm not finding them offhand, that I didn't necessarily agree with the recommendation,
Okay.
so.
And
The only
so
ones that, there were, I don't know if we want to go into them. There were only, I only have one that comes to mind now. I unfortunately left my list at home. For the most part, I was on board with them. One, I just wondered if there was more discussion in the background about the school safety and security one,
Okay.
about allowing districts to kind of choose how
Yes.
they were addressing school safety and security, as opposed to.
What number is that, do you
It's
know?
number 11.
So I can address that one, and part of the reason why, let's see. So the concept of number 11 is that, well, first of all, what these resolutions are, just to back up a little bit, is it instructs the director of the VSBA as far as what they're supposed to be advocating for in front of the Agency of Education, the Board of Education, and the legislature. So that's what these are, kind of the instructions of what to do in the upcoming year. So the concern with this particular proposal is that the concern is that a school district would want to arm their teachers.
I was wondering about that.
Got it. Okay.
And
I was thinking completely the opposite direction, which is I was thinking people would be a little bit laissez-faire because they were thinking, we're this rural district and we don't have
Well-
these concerns, because that's sort of how I read it. But I see where you're coming from at that.
and
Lack
nothing.
of quick access to police was what triggered, that's
Right,
what I
and-
inferred.
And I don't think we want to, there are other things going on as far as to try to expand the resource officers, even what we're doing here, even though we're not going to have the additional security individuals won't be armed, but there's different ways to get at this. I know there was legislation to try to have retired police officers be able to more readily be SROs, and that's not what this is. And one needs to perhaps have some maybe insight about where this came from as far as which district as well.
Okay. Okay.
So,
All
nothing
right.
against that district, but it's.
I have no problem with it then, the way it came out, yes.
Quick question, Martin. This is the Newark Town School District?
I believe so, yeah. Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah, yep, I know where it is. I'm trying to recall from my Department of Ed days, I don't believe they operate a school.
They have some sort of, no, they must be,
think they have an
it's somebody. It's somebody that has an elementary school
They do?
there
Okay.
that's not close to the police officer, but.
So Martin, just a question, I mean, boy, I know the last meeting, this was a marathon session for school boards at the resolution
Yeah,
meeting.
this is
I
gonna be
think it was a long, long
worse.
meeting. And I'm sure there's, I think there's a lot of work that's gone in. What has been the outcome, from VSBA that had impact on the 17-18? Did things go to legislation and have some effect? Did it help shape,
It'd be good to know.
mandates, unfunded or funded? I guess it would be, I'm just sensitive. Again, I watched some of you be in there until, I think it was the majority of your entire afternoon this went on.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of work that leads up to it. I think it's important to say, what are some of the potential avenues for outcomes?
Well, I mean, part of the resolutions, there was one put forward, there are a couple that are put forward from the VSBA staff. The one
I'm not trying to
regarding.
be, negative.
No, it's good. When the VSBA knows something might be coming down the pike, they ask for essentially guidance through the resolution process. So that's why the very last one has to do with appointing our members to the negotiating committee. So that's what that one has to do with. I think it might, and civil discourse, I guess, is the other one. So when they understand something's coming down the road, they do try to get the guidance. And other things are, suggestions from various school boards that they want them to actively advocate. And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. We're giving some directions, but it really depends when we're talking about the legislature.
Yeah.
The VSBA is not setting the priorities of the chairs for the education committees. And they try to predict so they have a position that they can take with things. But I think this past year, I'm not off the top of my head which resolutions passed last year may have affected this year. I don't know. It may have been more on the agency of education side and how Act 46 was being implemented, which is something that I don't dive deeply into because we haven't really had to here. Yeah, but they did ask, we had no resolutions last year that came from school boards. And we had 2 or 3 from the Vermont School Board Association. And that's what went before but there were 2 or 3 that were brought on the floor, and I recall that was what took a long time last year. This year is, they put effort into getting
That came out
school
of the
boards.
regional meetings about doing this earlier. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they did do that, and we did get a lot more, and that's why I really think Bridget Peter should be the one. So I can go to the happy hour. I'm just kidding. I'll stay with you every step of the way. I'll be there.
Well, I think it's good. I think it would be worthy of a conversation around some of our other organizations, the VSA, the VPA, the Vermont School Boards Association, and is there some level of triangulation and shared commitment? Because I think that would likely have a lot more, if they were narrowed down, focused, and provided to the legislature. I don't know the answer to that, but I feel like there's a lot of effort, and sometimes there's similar efforts. School Boards Association is doing this, and we're all at the same meeting. I wonder if there's some level of triangulation.
Well, I
that
think
can
they're
help with it.
the Vermont School Board Association, Principals Association, and School Board Association work really closely together, at least in legislature.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. It's just the resolution work that happens, comes from sometimes smart school boards, and they're coming forward with good information, and I just wonder if, I know that we don't at the superintendent's group, we're not looking at your same resolutions. I know that they may be working executive director to executive director on it, but I don't know. It's a question more than.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they do work pretty closely on this. So, because Elizabeth might have some comments, or other folks, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at these really closely, maybe we can put it back on.
It just, I would just do maybe a brief review at the 26th.
Yeah, in case there's anything else that people wanna weigh in on.
All right, so we'll move on to
We opine on things in our
appropriately setting the
jurisdiction.
agenda for the
Mhm.
26th.
Exactly.
So we have to add the SBA resolutions
Discussion, brief
discussion.
I think we need more than 10 minutes,
Okay.
probably.
Just a reminder, I will not be able to attend this meeting. This coincides with our board retreat. So
Okay.
I'm out of town.
So this is for either agenda or future agenda items, but I really want to get the student freedom of expression and school-sponsored media policy moving along. And I know that it's a proposed policy from the VSBA, required by legislation from a couple years ago. And I know that Karen has been working with some questions. I don't know what the status of those questions are, but I do think we need to get this into the hopper. If not at the next meeting, then the first one in October. It's just that we're,
Is it going to be implemented at the AOE level, do you think?
I don't know.
no, I think it's school boards are to adopt
Oh, okay.
this resolution.
Yeah. Mike, do you know anything? You don't, I don't have to.
Yeah.
So I guess we do have information, so.
Yeah, but I don't know if
Worked on
the VSBA, I know that some questions were asked of the VSBA. I don't know if they've responded yet, and if not, I'd be happy to try to prod them along to get the responses.
Yeah.
And I'd also be happy to sit down with,
Anyone we've, yeah.
because this is something that I dealt with a little bit in the
Mhm.
legislature as well, so know a little
Okay.
bit about it.
Thank you, Martin.
What, were you ready to talk about student outcomes at the next one? Just 'cause I know I'm anxious to hear about it, but I don't know if we'll be ready at that point to really talk about it. And my other one was totally unrelated, was the budget book. We really do need to, I need to put a deadline on myself to really go sit with Carrie and Amity. I've sort of started sketching out a few things that I think we need to adjust or add or take away, but we probably as a board should have a point where I sit with the two of them, or anyone else who wants to sit with me too, and then we sort of start this discussion of a draft of.
Budget book
of the-
design kind of
Yeah.
feedback. Mm-hmm.
You know, why don't we consider putting that on the 26th? Because it's ahead enough of the process, and then we're just reacting to the book itself,
Yeah.
not in the context of any budget conversation.
Yeah.
And then we'll get the full board, well, sorry, Steve, but we had almost a full board, really in more of a brainstorming mode.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Are you comfortable with that?
Sure. So we've got VSBA,
Kind of
resolution,
budget
quick
book
discussion,
discussion,
and
yeah.
budget book discussion.
And you'll find out if student outcomes are
Yep.
Already.
ready at that point. And what, on 2.4, you put down financial condition and activities look at previous fiscal year?
Yeah, it's just a mark for us to, you know, we gotta look.
Is
back
it on the
and talk.
calendar, 2.4 now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually how we start off the budget discussion,
that's it.
really, yeah.
Yep. We do have some work. I want to circle back with the board on our annual calendar, you know, and we do this. And you know, when you look at the calendar, we have budget months in there, which we didn't have before, right?
Mhm.
But we really, it's worthy of a deeper dive again, I think, around, I don't know. So, like asset protection, I think
Mhm.
in the future should move up. So, I mean, I'd like to just, you know, we'll put that on. I mean, we're pretty early, but I think we just need to talk more about reasons and rationale. Some may be fine to be towards the end of the year, because they're gonna inform our new, you know,
Mhm.
so it's just, and again, there's a lot of work that goes into them, and rightfully so, should be providing good information around our work. So, we'll circle that back, but that's why, yes, 2.4 is there.
Steve?
I only noticed because you said 2.4, and you may have, somebody may have identified it, I just didn't hear, but we call treatment of staff 2.1.
Yeah, it has to be back on there.
Yeah,
It's
and
2.2.
but I think it's
2.2.
2.2.
Oh, 2.2, yeah, good.
Got one.
All right, anything else for the 26th?
Jeez, guys,
Just to clarify,
Won't happen again.
that's good.
Yes, that was.
We are going to not discuss the the school psych request in open meeting, or?
There's some
No.
follow-up required.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so we're getting follow-up on that, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to, look, I think we have, anything else for future agenda items? Did you want to put that student expression of freedom on the list, Martin?
I'd rather have it on the agenda.
Do you,
But, yeah, I don't know, we'll have to look at,
I'll,
we definitely need to keep it as.
why don't we put it on
On the
the
list.
future agenda, and then if it can move up at this next one?
I'll try, yeah, and I'll try to work with VSBA to get the
Should
question
I
answered.
have, what's the right language? Is student freedom of expression.
Student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media.
Ooh, okay,
Freedom of the press,
long one.
student press.
All right, anything else from other board members on future agenda? Okay, anything we need to move up sooner versus later? Sounds like teacher evaluation system, we will
Yeah.
be getting updates. Okay. All right, we have a number of meeting minutes to consider, so let's just do these in order. August 13th. All right, seeing no comments, those are approved. August 15th.
The only one I have in here, and I wasn't sure, maybe we made a mistake at the meeting. I think it said somewhere in here that the vote was on November
Yes, I
7th.
caught that one too.
Instead of November 6th.
Yeah, and I did have a couple of comments on this one because I looked at that tape, so I'll just run them really quickly if anybody has major objections. In the last paragraph.
Which one are you on, Elizabeth?
I'm on August
August
15th, yeah. That Ms. Fitzgerald noted the school board would be meeting immediately following this meeting, and that there is a warning for a vote on November 6th. This is where the right date would be put in. So I can just give you these
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
And then also a note on the back that I know in this particular meeting, I was referencing the formal definitive agreement as a binding MOU. So if, I just wanted to put a signing of a binding MOU where we had that. And I did not recall talking about premature to talk about the MOU. And lastly, my recollection was that Helen, in the second to last paragraph, Ms. Reilly said that information the council needs is a final number for the ballot. But I think we also agreed, and a decision whether the municipal center or city center would be for 2 or 3 uses. So I think they were still having that discussion. So I can just give you these
Yeah, that'd be
notes
good.
on here,
Mhm.
if they're not legible.
I got it.
All right, any other comments on the 15th? All right, we had the regular meeting of August 15th. Sorry, I should have referred to that, the joint meeting. And I had one comment there of discussion regarding an executive session employment evaluation.
Good.
There's a few of those in here.
See?
Anybody else have any comments on that one? I can give you that one too.
Yeah.
All right, seeing none, looking at August 20th, which was a working session. Seeing no comments, those are approved. August 23rd. Seeing none, those are approved. August 27th.
How many meetings did we have in August?
Yeah, I know. August, we were supposed to have off. Seeing none, those are approved, and another meeting on August 27th. All right, seeing none, those are approved.
All right, wait 1 second on that.
Oh, okay.
Where's the one that I was not at? There's one I was not at, let me see. All right, no, I got it, that's good, okay. No, I'm
You okay?
good. I'm good, yeah.
All right, we'll move on to AP orders, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Any questions on those? All right, we'll move on to agenda item 17. We have 2 AP order checks, one to Environmental Hazards Management, Inc., in the amount of $68,926, and a second to Jim Bilodeau Roofing, LLC, in the amount of $56,252.
Where was the asbestos again? Just, you remind me?
Gary, can you
And that was remediated?
The asbestos that we, it was in,
Oh, it's in the tile that was.
tile in this school, right?
Okay, okay. The flooring, okay, thanks.
Just a quick question on that. I don't know if you can answer this, but has most of the tile in all the facilities been replaced yet?
Can't quantify it with a percentage,
Okay,
but most of what we are planning to do is
okay. Because that's been something that's been, asbestos remediation has been on in the budget for years.
And it typically will be into perpetuity just because of the age of the facilities. Anything that we touch.
Well, I guess that my
it's, you know,
point, though, was, have we gotten through it all at this point?
No.
It's not.
No.
We talked about in past budget cycles, only replacing the things that are damaged or that actually.
Yeah.
have
Right,
some
don't you
risk.
sort of leave it
Yeah.
alone?
Yeah,
if
you know, like
Right.
floor tile, unless it becomes cracked, broken. I mean, Elizabeth's not wrong. We've renovated many spaces, you know, the lobby of the middle school, these hallways, you see, they're all new tile. That's all new and updated, but there's a lot of stuff that, everything we've touched, even, again, you know, from the sound testing that we did over at Chamberlain, the window glaze had some hazardous material. So it's to say that we've totally, one, identified all of it and mitigated all of it. I don't know what that percentage would be, but anyway.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve the 2 AP order checks in the amounts indicated?
So moved?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We are
You can
adjourned.
have that, Bridget. You'd be